Hi, everyone. This is chapter 14. We're going to be talking about vaccines in this particular chapter. So in this 14.1, we're going to talk a little bit about the early history of vaccines, from what was called variolation to Jenner, a researcher named Jenner, and his advancements of how they figured out the first vaccines. I want to talk about some factors that have contributed to the reemergence of vaccine-preventable diseases. We'll talk a little bit about what this looks like as we see a dropping in vaccination rates and what that means. In addition, in this chapter, I'll try to explain a little bit as we talk more about vaccines, about the idea of making a vaccine for COVID-19. So, vaccine history. Hundreds of years ago, there were Chinese researchers and doctors who used something called variolation to combat smallpox. Smallpox is very lethal. It kills most people. And so what the Chinese had figured out is that if you made powder from the dried scabs of people who had had smallpox, you could blow that powder, basically the dried scab powder, into a healthy individual's nose. And what ended up happening is if those people then were infected with smallpox infections, they tended to be milder infections. They survived them. And there was only about a 1 to 2% mortality rate, which is actually quite low when we think of smallpox. So thinking about this, Edward Jenner, who was a researcher in the late 1800s, recognized that milkmaids were not affected by smallpox epidemics. So if a smallpox epidemic broke out, women who milked cows were unaffected. They would not get smallpox. And what he knew about this was that most of them had contracted a type of disease or infection from cows at some point in their work called cowpox. And so Jenner thought that there was probably some sort of protection if you had cowpox prior to getting smallpox, that would actually protect you. So with that knowledge, he decided to test this hypothesis. Now, this is a little bit different than what we can do today with experiments. But at the time, Edward Jenner decided to inoculate a boy with cowpox pus. So somebody or a cow that had cowpox, he actually took some of basically the infectious agents out of that person's cowpox pus, and he inoculated the boy with that. The boy got cowpox, but quickly recovered because he's not a good host for that. And then what Jenner did was he went ahead and infected him with smallpox. This is not something we would do today, but what ended up happening was this boy was protected. He got no symptoms of smallpox. And so the word vaccination actually comes from the word vaca for cow. So that's why we use the word vaccination. Smallpox vaccinations were soon mandated for British soldiers and then sought out by people around the world. So as they started to develop, Louis Pasteur in the late 1800s developed the first early version of a rabies vaccine to protect humans, and he also produced or developed a vaccine to protect cattle against anthrax. At this point, we now have at least 25 different infections that are vaccine preventable, meaning that if you get a vaccine, you most likely would not get infected with it. And in the 20th century, what we saw was that the WHO helped bring vaccines to developing nations as well as already developed nations, and they served as an important partner in eradicating smallpox. So eradication means that there are no new cases worldwide, and we have done that with smallpox. The next disease that is targeted for eradication is polio. We're working on that. And another one that they're looking at is measles, although we've kind of taken a step back recently with the reduced rate of vaccination for measles. So this is just going a quick picture of a child who had smallpox. This is obviously not from recent since it's been eradicated. So people no longer get this as it's been eradicated from the world. So at this point in vaccinations, looking back a little bit, not quite totally recent, but the CDC estimates that from 1994 to 2013, so in a 19-year period in the U.S. alone, the vaccines actually prevented 21 million hospitalizations and almost 750,000 deaths. And when we look at this, the centuries of historical evidence and formal scientific research show the life-saving benefits of vaccines. But this practice has been a frequent source of controversy, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So in the early 1800s, anti-vaccination societies actually started in England and protested this. In India, many were offended with the smallpox vaccine because cows are sacred to Hindus in India. They didn't want to be injected with something that came from cows. And in the 1900s, states began enforcing vaccination among citizens to try to prevent outbreaks of disease. And what happened was that this spurred lots of complaints, as you can imagine, in the United States, of the idea of individual rights being lost, the right to be able to choose. So when we think about that, more recently, probably what more of you guys are familiar with is the idea that we've started to have this uptick in kind of an anti-vaccination movement. And lots of that is fears that came from vaccinations that a paper based on vaccinations that came out in 1998. This was a paper that was published in The Lancet, which is a big research paper, and it studied only 12 patients. It wasn't actually a good study. And in the claim, this researcher said that there was some sort of correlation that he saw between MMR vaccine and the development of autism. Very shortly after that, in the United States and the UK and even around Europe, people started to not want to vaccinate their kids with the MMR vaccine and other vaccinations. In 2010, so about 12 years after this came out, this article was fully retracted because it turned out it was bad science. The author, the researcher, was actually paid by lawyers of parents who had autistic children who were trying to sue the vaccine companies, and so they wanted this paper to back them up. Since then, that main researcher, the author who wrote this, lost his medical license amid these charges of fraud and malpractice. And there have been thousands of studies now looking at if there's a connection between vaccines and autism. And as recently as 2015, what we saw is a study of 9,000 children that showed no link between the MMR vaccine and autism. And as a matter of fact, there was a study a couple of years ago that looked at over, I think, 200,000 children, and they actually saw an increase of autism in the children who did not have vaccinations over the children that did have vaccinations. But this was something that really kind of got the fear in people who maybe were already a little bit nervous about vaccines to think about not doing vaccinations. So with that, we have a reemergence of a lot of old health threats in both the United States and the UK, and actually throughout Europe. What we've seen is this drop in childhood vaccination rates has led to outbreaks of diseases that we think of as preventable and ones that we didn't see very commonly. Measles and pertussis, or whooping cough, are the ones that show the strongest reemergence. In 2015, we had a huge outbreak at Disneyland that had 189 cases, and it actually ended up infecting people in 24 states. Idaho even had an outbreak at the University of Idaho around this time for students who had not been vaccinated. So when we think about this, what's starting to happen is that I think that the CDC and health departments, public health departments, are trying to change this to make this so that it becomes more mandatory to a sense. And in this case, most of them are looking at school enrollment rules, that there's no more opting out for personal beliefs. There still probably would be opting out for medical, but that would be the only reason. In California right now, they require children to receive at least 10 immunizations to attend school or daycare, and they only exempt it for medical reasons. And we'll talk more about why that's important, that everybody who can get vaccinated does get vaccinated for those who are not able to. And we can talk a little bit about what that will look like with COVID-19 as well. So thinking about this, I'm going to jump back a slide. When we think about this, one of the things that I want you to think about with vaccination, and this is one of the key parts, is that it needs to be thought of in the perspective of public health. So it does, in some sense, mean that the individual's rights are different from the public or society's. And that's one of the things that we want to think about with vaccinations. Vaccinations, I really think about, are from a public health policy view, meaning that the good of the whole is then good for the individual. And that can come into conflict with people who are feeling like their individual rights are not being considered. But when we look at public health is never looking at one person. It's looking at the greater good or the greater society. So I want you to think about that as we move through here. So for your checking in, I'd like you to be able to define the term variolation. Also, let me know what disease has been eradicated through the use of vaccines. There's only one that we've been able to eradicate so far. And what disease or diseases that were close to eradication are now on the rise. And that's the end of chapter 14.1.